Chapter 12, Section 2, Americans Face Hard Times. How did the Great Depression affect lives in urban, so city areas, and rural Americans? So we're going to look at the widespread unemployment in American cities, discuss the impact of the Great Depression in rural America, and then the human and geographical factors that created and led to the Dust Bowl. So when we look at cities, searching for a job and a meal. So cities are going to kind of have unique situation compared to rural areas. You got to kind of keep in mind when I talk about rural farms in a little bit, they were far more diversified. So they would have had dairy cows, they would have had chickens, they would have had pigs. They would have been able to have at least the day-to-day basics to be able to survive. In the cities, that's a little bit bigger problem. So when we look at the height of the Great Depression, 1933, 1934, we've got 1 out of 4 workers is out of a job. And then we'll see these policies that will be enacted in the New Deal, which will be the next chapter. And you can see that it's going to lead to a general decrease. It drops below 15%. Things are looking really good in 1937. And so FDR starts to ease some of those New Deal policies. And then we can see what happens to unemployment. It jumps right back up again. So there was a double dip here that's going to cause the problems a little bit later on. So in inner cities, one of the things that they need to do is they need to feed the people. And so many cities go to bread lines and soup kitchens so that way they can make sure that the people in the cities have enough to eat. And so soup is pretty good because you can feed an awful lot of people, and bread is relatively cheap. Another thing to keep in mind is even those people who weren't unemployed saw 10 to 30% reduction in wages. So even if you weren't unemployed, you had less money than you had before. Descending into Poverty, one of the famous songs from the era is Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Looking for places to live. It's kind of interesting because we get a lot of things that are nicknamed after President Hoover. So Hoover probably unfairly gets the blame for the Great Depression. He just happened to be the guy that was in office. It was all the policies before him, and he happened to be sitting in the chair when the Great Depression hit. I don't know that you can really fault his policies, but what you can really look at is that Americans just kind of lost faith in him a little bit because he didn't exude this confidence that you really needed. He made some statements about the economy that proved to be untrue, and again, he's making predictions, and those predictions don't come true, and so people lose some faith in him. So when we look at Hoovervilles, this would be an image of a Hooverville, these temporary shanties that pop up throughout the city. Hoover blankets would be newspapers. Hoover flags were people who stood there with their pants and their pockets pulled out, showing that there was nothing in their pants, and that's what a Hoover flag was. When we look at rural Americans, commodity prices plunge, and we already saw that graphic in the previous section. One of the things that comes out of this is the Sioux City Milk Wars. So here, farmers are dumping milk out rather than sell it at a loss. And so we're going to get farmers that are going to organize and try and create almost like a farmer's market that begins in the Midwest, especially in Iowa, is kind of the center of this movement. And what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and cut production so that they can raise the price of things. So by dumping the milk out, there's less milk available, and hopefully farmers will get more money for the milk that they are selling. They begin to lose their farms. They become tenant farmers. This is from Nebraska, the Von Bond family auction. So what neighbors did is they showed up to this auction and they would only bid a penny for all of this stuff that the bank was selling. And in the end, bank got $5.35 for the entire farm and everything that was on it. All the machinery, all of the livestock, all of the crops, all of the things inside the house and the sheds. They only recouped $5.35. And so we see this as the first penny auction. And this penny auction is going to pop up throughout really the rest of the Midwest here pretty quick. The Great Plains becomes a dust bowl. Why does it become a dust bowl? You got new farming methods that allow them to plant far more land than it was before. The other problem you run into is before the Dust Bowl, we went through a decade or so of extremely high precipitation. And again, this confidence that this is the way life is going to be from here on out. is going to cause people to grow crops in places where they shouldn't have been growing crops. Then not only does the rainfall go back to normal, it's worse. We go through a period of drought, and this whole area is going to dry out. This is really the key probably focus point of the Great Depression. This is or the Dust Bowl. That's where most of the dirt is lost, but these other regions are damaged also by dust storms. And so this is what a dust storm would look like. All of a sudden, the wind would start blowing, and then you would get this cloud of dust that was, half a mile to a mile tall, and it would come sweeping through, and it would leave everything with a half an inch to an inch layer of dust on it when it would come through because these buildings weren't sealed very well. And when you look at some of the other pictures, you can start to see this is not a snow drift, that is a dirt drift. And 2 times the amount of dirt that was moved for the Panama Canal blew away during this dust bowl. What's going to happen is in these places that are hardest hit, they're going to migrate. Many of them are going to migrate to California. So when we get to um, the the New Deal, and when we watch the Grapes of Wrath, we can see these Okies and Arkies who are going to California and the reasons behind it. But that's what's causing this massive migration out of this area. Few Americans are going to be able to escape this. And it says this sign, jobless men keep going, we can't take care of our own. It's going to attack family life. It affects men differently than it does women. During this period of time, men are supposed to be the breadwinners. And when men can't do that for their families, it really hurts their self esteem. And so you've got this Great Depression fog that they talk about, these men that are kind of walking through life like zombies. We see birth rates and marriages going down, divorce and single family homes reach an all time high, and really minorities are going to get hit harder than other groups of people simply because minorities were already discriminated against, but then they're going to be the first ones to let go. And so African American unemployment is nearly double white unemployment. Well, actually, that unemployment number, that 25%, is for all Americans. So when you factor in the fact that African American unemployment is near 50%, that means white unemployment is much lower than that 25%. And you also see Mexican Americans being forced out of the United States so that whites can take over the jobs that Hispanic Americans were doing.